this effort with people-centered Colorado Springs and help build a website. I've long been an advocate for bicycling and bicycles as transportation around the region. And the more I've realized that not everybody will be able to ride, we need to provide other options like walkable and transit options so that our city can be a place for everybody, for people, not just people who drive. So, uh, and specifically why I'm interested in Front Range Rail, uh, it's going to be about a block from my house or 2 blocks from my house. So just on the other side of I-25 from me. So, and I've cautiously optimistically promised to my son that we'll hopefully ride Front Range Rail to Denver before he graduates high school, which he's 6 now. So we'll see if that happens. But that's my little hope here.
And then popcorn to someone, which is just yell another person's name. And couples, I guess, both go together so we don't become confused.
I'm gonna send it over to Jacqueline if she's available.
Hey everybody, yeah, this is Jax and she, her, pronouns, and I'm here because I like to be supportive of organizations like Bike Colorado Springs and do that kind of advocacy in my neighborhood in Southeast. And I'm particularly interested in Front Range passenger rail because I work for an organization that is a statewide reach and often commute to Denver. So I'd love to be able to use that hour and a half in a different way. And I will popcorn it too. I see Joan on my list.
Thanks, Jax. Joan staying here, live in Manitou. I advocate passionately to save lives on our roadways. I want safe experiences for people outside of cars. I want it to be safe, convenient, and accessible for everybody. And I'm jazzed. Wouldn't it be awesome if we actually had passenger rail coming all the way down here and beyond? I want this to happen so badly. So I'm here because I'm so interested and want to support it. And for all those who wonder what else do I do, I'm running the Pac-Man Pedestrian and Cycle Manitou Facebook and Instagram accounts. So that's where I'm at. And then also I've been the education chair for Bike Colorado Springs for the last 4 years. Thanks.
And Doc, we're just introducing ourselves and then popcorning to different people after we call it, explain why we care about passenger rail.
And I'll just add, I'm Carl Stang, and the only thing I would throw in on top of Joan is we can't keep adding lanes to I-25 to get up to Denver. That's just absolutely silly. And so, yes, I would love to take the train to Denver and beyond, right? What a great way to spend time commuting versus behind the wheels. So, and we'll pass it to John.
Oh, John's biking, right?
He might not be able to handle. Well, we'll go back to him. Let's go to Doc because I don't know who you are. Doc, can you introduce yourself and explain why you care about passenger rail up and down the Front Range? If not, we'll go to Andrea and Newland.
Hi, we're Andrea and Newland kind of joined the group before me, and we're just loving. We're from an area that is not at all walkable, so we're really encouraged to get into advocating for more walking, more biking, and I personally am really interested in the Front Range Rail because I think we need to connect the cities a lot easier, especially for people who may not want to own vehicles. I know I work with a lot of people who live in Pueblo And I'm sure there's a lot of people that live here and work in Denver, and we need to make it easier for everybody to have access to the cities.
My main interest in rail is that to get people out of your cars, you need public transport that actually goes to places that people need to go. And it needs to be convenient and timely. Oh, I can't read anyone's names.
Is that Deb?
Hi, we're Deb and Tim. Did it? Oh yeah, it is going. Sorry. So we're pretty interested in the rail because we live in what I think is the most walkable neighborhood in all of Colorado Springs. We're in Bonnieville and very fortunate to have things within just a few minutes walk or bike ride. And we've been trying to advocate for more safer streets and more bike lanes instead of car lanes. And for when we want to go outside of our immediate area, rail would be the likely option. And I think we should have done this all along the Front Range through the state a long time ago. So if we can get something going within the next 10 to 15 years, that would be fabulous, like really great. So we're interested in hearing more about it, definitely. And I don't know, do we have anybody left? Let's see.
Stephanie on autopilot.
Stephanie then.
And we'll also have Savannah. Savannah, do you want to introduce yourself and explain why you care about Front Range passenger rail? If not, if anybody else wants to introduce themselves, now is the time to speak.
I will introduce myself.
Oh yes, Naomi. She's our candidate for CC3, and I'm very excited that she's here at Front Range Passenger Rail.
Yes, my name is Naomi Lopez, and I am candidate for County Commission District 3. Super excited. I'm also a speech language pathologist. I work in District 11. And why wouldn't I be interested in Front Range Rail? Just like everyone else said, we need to have more options for our residents that don't want to or can't own a car. And we are way behind the times as a metropolitan city, connecting with the other cities around us. Having another ability to commute is just going to expand our ability to increase our economic development here in our city and our county. So of course, it's kind of a no-brainer, and I'm kind of bewildered like everyone else of why we haven't already started this project.
Cool. And this is Chrissy Breit, and she is, I just quickly looked at your LinkedIn, and she is the program coordinator for Front Range Rail District. And then Jordan Jewsbury is here, and they're the policy and engagement intern for Front Range Passenger Rail. And yes, we would love to hear your presentation. We've asked a bunch of questions, and you said that you had some ability to answer them, and some stuff is still unknown. So we'll find out. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys for the introduction. That was really helpful to know who's in the room. I have a presentation that mostly does not address the questions because it's a little higher level, but I can answer them because I've been talking to engineers all day, so I'm good to go. I am going to make a pretty famous Zoom mistake and try to play a video. If this works, it'll be amazing. And if it doesn't, I'll put the link in the chat and you can watch it later. So let's see if magic happens. All right, hold on. Let me share my screen. Share sound, optimize for video clip. Let's see. All right. I'm going to press play, and if you guys don't hear anything, raise your hand and make noise.
Colorado Front Range, where the Great Plains meet the Rocky Mountains, where cities, towns, and neighborhoods each have a unique character, yet all share the legacy of a pioneering spirit and a belief in what's possible, where world-class educational institutions are making groundbreaking.
Shit, just screw it up now.
It's working.
It was? Is it still? Or
yes, we were hearing it and it was playing.
Okay, hold on. Let's try this again.
making discoveries, and preparing the next generation to lead. It's a place where people want to be. And for the 5 million of us who are lucky enough to live, work, play, and raise families here, it's home. Over the next 25 years, this home is expected to grow by more than 3 million people, and most of them will have cars. This growing population presents new challenges, like making sure we can keep Coloradans moving when our roads just weren't built for this many cars. Yet in this challenge, we see possibility. At this key moment in our state's history, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a new way to connect Coloradans. A new way to travel along the Front Range that's fast, safe, reliable, and comfortable. Front Range Passenger Rail will link communities across the Front Range from southern Colorado to Fort Collins with modern and efficient passenger rail service. From the Chili Festival in Pueblo to basketball, football, baseball, and hockey games in Denver. From Boulder's Flatirons and Pearl Street Mall to the nationally recognized breweries of Fort Collins. Intercity passenger rail service along the Front Range will connect Coloradans to opportunities, adventure, and each other. Now, with new sources of federal funding and a commitment from state leaders and local communities, Colorado is at an exciting juncture, and Front Range passenger rail service is within reach. Join us as we unlock new opportunities to connect with one another and chart a new path forward to meet the transportation needs of tomorrow.
All right, I'm glad that worked. Now I'm going to go to my actual slides. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, so I think a lot of what I'm going to say in the next few slides, you just heard through the video, but the video is new and the slides are old, so it's kind of funny to compare the two. Front Range Passenger Rail, right, is the idea for this new intercity train service, and you'll hear me use the term intercity a fair amount because it's a new idea for Colorado. Initial service we're looking at is from Pueblo up through to Denver and then up to Fort Collins. We have a longer term vision of connecting further south to New Mexico and further north to Wyoming. A key thing about the service we're looking at is that we're going to be using existing freight tracks. The reason we're looking to operate on those tracks is that it can minimize the costs and accelerate the start date. It sounds like based upon the gentleman with the kid, we have 12 years to get this going, so I got to make sure that I can deliver in that time period. Again, as I mentioned, intercity rail, that is kind of the train car on the right, and that's what we're looking at. I know that you folks live in the Springs, so you're not part of the RTD system, but if anyone's ever taken the A line to the airport or ridden the RTD commuter rail, you'll notice it's the train on the left, so it's much shorter distances between stations. The train stops more frequently, which means that the trains can't go as fast. And so they're really intended in commuter rail to connect kind of a metropolitan area, whereas intercity rail, the FRPR service, is connecting major cities across the state. So you have longer distances between stations, but the trains can also go much faster. It was fun to hear you guys talk about why you're excited about this. And one thing that I'm really excited about in terms of passenger rail is that it can meet all kinds of people with all kinds of trip needs. So often we hear about rail, we think about sort of this antiquated kind of, I'm only going to work and I'm only going to ride the train to go to my 8 to 5 office commute. But in reality, the kind of service we're looking at could serve a variety of uses from, connecting all the colleges along the Front Range. Pretty much every major city that we're stopping at for this service has some degree of a college or university there. Obviously, there's the major kind of festivals and sporting events, entertainments that happens at different areas of the state. And if we can get people to concerts, to festivals there and back safely, that'd be a major win for Colorado. As Zuri mentioned at the beginning, I am from the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And what that is that about 2 years ago, our Colorado legislature established this brand new local government, and we have kind of the new statutory mission purely to bring passenger rail to the Front Range. So we have this role of financing, designing, constructing, operating, and maintaining. The reason why having this district and this kind of new government thing matters is that we have kind of the governance structure and the ability to raise the money that is actually needed to make this happen. I think to people's points earlier, why has this not happened previously? A lot of good reasons. And one of them is because we haven't really had a structure whereby we could raise the money to actually make this happen. Of course, when I say raise the money, I don't inherently mean bake sales and things like that. For this to be successful, we will have to go to the voters at some point in the near future to get a sales tax passed so that we can actually fund the startup of this and continue the operations of the service. Where are we at today? So this is the stuff gets to be a little weedy, so I apologize for all the information. Through President Biden's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as bipartisan infrastructure law, there are all sorts of new programs and new funding sources to kind of improve transportation throughout the US. And one of those ones is a new program called the Corridor Identification and Development Program, or Corridor ID. And that is focused specifically on working to bring new passenger rail corridors throughout the country. So last spring, there was a competitive process whereby corridors from all over the country applied to be part of this program. And we were just accepted, 2-3 weeks ago now. And what this means is that the federal government recognizes that Front Range passenger rail is a really important corridor throughout the US, and they want to work with us to build the capacity to make it actually happen and to help us get funding to make it happen. So as part of being accepted into the CIDP program, we just received $500,000 off the bat, which we can use to advance technical work. But more interestingly than that, we're now part of this pipeline of preferred projects that get kind of preferential access to some of the IIJA grant opportunities in the years ahead. So if you have $500,000 and you think that's not much money, you're absolutely right. But what it means is that we're working with the FRA hand in hand to make sure this passenger service actually comes to fruition, and we have access to more money working through them with pretty good local to federal match requirements. So where we're also at right now is we are doing our service development plan, and this is really kind of the planning work that defines where the train's going to go, where it's going to stop, what will service look like, when will it be operating, how much is it going to cost to ride the train, and then how much is it going to cost to actually build all of this, and things of that nature. So that's kind of the exciting planning stuff that we're doing right now. Some early insights we have from the planning work so far is that, as I said earlier, we're going to predominantly use the service in the first few, as we started off, using the freight railroad tracks and sharing the tracks with them. As mentioned earlier, also, we're going to be running from Pueblo to Denver to Fort Collins. Right now, looking at kind of 9 major markets. So that means that there'd be stops in all of the cities on the bottom of this PowerPoint slide. Given some of the preliminary analysis work thus far, what we're seeing is that the service that's being planned is viable and it's competitive in terms of travel time with cars, and that when looking at other systems across the country, ours is pretty similar on ridership. So what we're looking at in the Front Range is something that has worked in other places successfully. And then, as mentioned, if all goes according to plan, we should have the service up and going in the next 10 to 15 years. I see that there are things in the chat, but I'm going to ignore the chat. If someone needs me to change anything, let me know. This slide is a little weedy, but essentially what are we doing right now as part of that service planning? What we're doing is looking at the ridership numbers. Where are people traveling between cities? Where are some of those biggest areas of city pairs? How much money can be generated through those travels, and in terms of things like how much ticket revenue can we get based upon that ridership number? Another big part of this, obviously talking to the host railroads, the route that we're looking at would be on track owned by Union Pacific Railroad as well as BNSF Railway. And so we're talking with them right now to say, hey, we want to use your tracks. What does that look like? What kind of capacity do you have? What kind of improvements would we need to make to add capacity for passenger rail? How much would this cost? Things like that. It's a big thing we're working on right now. And then also along those lines, just talking to different communities that are slated to have stations, just to get a sense of their kind of local planning priorities and figuring out where's a good station location in those communities based upon what's needed for the rail service and what works well for the community's goals. This slide is really just intended to show that we are not at the beginning of this process, but we also have a long way to go. So we have some feasibility done. We're in the service planning. We are starting to work through some of the financing and figuring out how much money do we need to raise to make this happen and what sources of money are available to pay for this. After that, we have a thing called NEPA, which is an environmental clearance process. Essentially, before you can use federal money to do big construction projects, they want to make sure that you have considered sort of any kind of impacts to communities and that that's appropriately mitigated. After we get through that environmental process, it's construction, it's opening day service. And then as people, kind of start using the train, as ridership grows, our goal is to run more service and have expanded routes over time. I think a big takeaway I want us to have from this conversation is just this is a really unique opportunity. It is really cool that we now have this Front Range Passenger Rail District, which is, again, the pure charge we have as an organization is to make this happen. Governor Polis and his administration is extremely excited about this and is really working hard to bring passenger rail to Colorado. And then again, with the new infrastructure law created about, 2 years ago now, there's unprecedented amounts of funding available to actually make this happen. I am going to do a few slides and I might actually stop a little prematurely or I might bounce around a bit. But I think just a lot of times people ask me, what can I do to help? What can I do right now? And that's a great question. I would say there are a few kind of shorter term things we could use help with, and then there's some longer term things. So in the shorter term, the biggest thing right now is helping to spread the word about FRPR. Starting this year, we're going to do some much more concerted communications efforts so that as opposed to being a few select few like us that have heard about it, more of our neighbors and friends will know what FRPR is. And so as we get our social media up and running and things like that, anything you guys can do to share social media, share articles with your networks and your friends is really important. Along those lines, reaching out to your local representatives, city council, mayor, county commissioners, and letting them know this matters is a really good thing you can do. Kind of like tonight, where we set up a community briefing to help kind of spread the word and generate excitement. We are always looking to groups we can talk to about this project. And then last thing in this near-term bucket of things is providing input on that service development plan. So around this spring, they will have a fairly big kind of deliverable that'll be available for public comment. Providing comments on that, it really helps us make sure we design a program that works well for everybody. That's the immediate term. In a longer term sense, when we do eventually go to a ballot for a tax raising initiative, there will be a campaign committee set up, and that will be by a different organization that's not us. But at that point in time, there will definitely be opportunities for, phone banking, canvassing, fundraising, things like that. So just wanted to say, people often ask me what can I do to help? And the biggest thing right now is spread the word, tell your friends, get the information out there. And then in time, what you can do to help will be a little more like a traditional campaign like you've seen for kind of a person running for office. I guess I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen because I can't see you guys. I have my settings wrong. And I want to be able to see you again. Awesome. Okay. I just want to quickly ask, have most of you guys seen our website? Are you familiar with this at all? Or is this like, okay, it's got some head nods. That's good. Okay. Do most of you, and if not, that's okay, already receive our e-blasts or our listserv mailing list things?
I get your emails. I would say making it less technical and more like user friendly might be nice.
I would too, and if I could control that, I would have changed that. But unfortunately,
yeah, because I was like trying to do this. I was like, okay,
yeah,
but I was like, not. It wasn't
no,
easy.
it's not. Yeah,
it wasn't
it's
easy
not
to figure
good.
out how to contact somebody, and I'm pretty aggressive, and so I was able to set this up. But like,
yeah,
another person's not going to be that like tenacious.
No, I totally agree. And again, that is a thorn in my side that I'm working on. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew the website existed. You knew you could get information through that source. But more than that, I would love to hear your questions. And then depending upon how many questions you have, I'm happy to post some of my questions back at you guys for your input. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting a seasonal cold, so I am all kinds of stuffy right now. So
that's why we're not in person, so we don't have to worry about it. I know
Seriously.
Cully had a question of, do we know the
Okay.
timing for a ballot measure?
Great question. We don't know that yet. We're trying to triangulate that perfect moment of when are we going to get the most voters at the voting box that'll vote yes, with also the best timing of our planning development. So that is still being determined.
And one thing I've just expressed pretty big disappointment with is this is very outdated. Like, this is outdated rail for the 1960s. Like, we've had high-speed rail since the 1960s, and this is slower than I-70. Unless they're going 75 or above, it shouldn't take longer to take a train than it is to drive. And that is also important because when you're taking a train, you have to get to the train station. So that's additional time. And then I would also say one thing that we haven't done, which is we haven't spoken about, we always make transit for the people, for the most inconvenienced person. So from what I was seeing from Amtrak before, this is longer to drive and it's twice a day. In the morning, there's 2 trains, and in the evening, there's 2 trains. And I understand starting off that way. And I also expressed disappointment with using freight lines because those are incredibly outdated, and we're basically giving them free money, even though they don't maintain their lines and haven't updated them in like 50 years. I don't know. And that's why I wanted to know, like, when was the last time they had updated their rail lines? Because like, I was wondering if we could have a safety aspect to this where we talk about how we need to update the lines with up to date. I'm like, if we're going to do this investment, why don't we do it right, is how I feel. And why don't we make it something that's actually exciting instead of something that is going to be worse than if you drove.
Yeah.
Like twice a day, slower than driving. I'm not going to use it. My mom took the train from, like, I think it's from Grand Junction once. It took 4.5 hours. It was shared with freight, which is worse in the mountains than it is. I can't remember if it's Grand Junction or which exact place, but it's harder, so they can't go around. But the way that freight trains are overly long, they also haul coal. It does not make it a pleasant experience. And again, we can't keep building crap and then being like, why don't you use it? Unless you're utterly desperate and you don't have a car and you just like have to get to Denver for like a court date. Like, that's the kind of rail we're building when it's 35 to 55 miles an hour. And then you're like, why don't people use it? Well, I wouldn't, I couldn't explain why I would use it. I used to have to work in Pueblo. I could not use this for work. I would be like, why? I couldn't use it. It's unusable.
So let me respond to a few of your comments, and I think in part address some things that maybe aren't accurate. So absolutely, would high-speed rail be amazing? Definitely. I think the challenge we have is you look at California and high-speed rail there and how it's been 20, 25 years and there's still not a rail line. And so I think we have kind of this mandate to try to bring service sooner than later. And so that's part of why we're using this approach of shared tracks. Additionally, I would say that you had a lot of points. I don't reply to all of them. So there will be more than, once we get the service going, there'll be more than 2 trains a day. So at minimum, so I think that fortunately it's going to be more than that. One thing that's really confusing is that Amtrak operates long distance services. And those are the trains that are the Feifel goes west, you go from Chicago to LA on one crazy long train ride. The kind of service that we're looking at is a different kind of service. And so it's tends to have much stronger on-time travel performance, and it has more frequent trips during the day, and it is more competitive than it's more competitive with automobiles. I guess one thing I want to note is that our legislation creating the district has the mandate in it that we have to be competitive with cars in terms of travel time. And so that's partially why we don't have stops in every community. It's only 9 communities that get stops. I would also add, I know that I have that slide that says like average travel time. That is really sometimes misleading. In talking to my colleagues, we're looking at about a 70-minute trip from Colorado Springs to Denver. To your point, that is from station to station. So it's, the time to get there is time. I think the hope that we have is that as the region continues to grow, and we have 5 million now, it's going to be 3 million more in 30 years, that the more reliability of the train, the better experience of that kind of travel where you can hang out and not worry about driving through snow and accidents and crashes makes up for that. So we're looking at, kind of top speeds of 80 to 90 miles per hour initially. And yes, it'll be less when you reach stations and you have to kind of, decelerate and stuff. But I'm hopeful that it is competitive with cars, because otherwise, to your point, it won't work, right? It has to be competitive. Otherwise, who's going to take this?
Yeah, and that's the
So,
thing. It's like it doesn't have to be high speed rail, but it has
Yeah.
to be able to get to 80 to 90 and not, it can't be 35. We can't, and also, so how are you guys
No.
planning to deal with 35 to 50, even 55? It's like you can't, and also how are you planning on dealing with the freight companies and their extra long carloads? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really challenging. Is this the John Oliver one in the YouTube? I'm just curious whoever posted that.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I watched that. I watched that 2 nights ago. A couple things. So yes, the freight cars are really long, and that's a reality. We do operation modeling with them, and we do negotiating. And so part of the negotiations is an expectation of on-time performance. And so what we do is we will be building kind of siding tracks that parallel the main tracks that the freight trains can pull into and passenger trains go by. And that's kind of a way that we kind of ensure fluidity on the track, and aren't kind of blocked by the long freight trains. But that is absolutely a reality that we exist in. I mean, I'm not gonna,
Is there
that's
any
very
way that we
real.
can find them, like a lot of money? Like I mean,
For on-time performance
my
issues?
ultimate goal would be to bankrupt the freight companies and nationalize them, but I would love it to be a real problem for them. I don't want it to be oh well, you got $100 fine for making us all late for work.
Yeah. So good question. There are a few aspects to that. One is that it's definitely possible when you have access agreements with them to negotiate on-time performance metrics, and that, the payment to them is based upon sort of we've met the on-time standard in a certain way, kind of like any contract you have. There are also instances where there's a federal oversight group called the Surface Transportation Board, and they're the ones that kind of are the federal court on this. And sometimes people have to bring cases to them and say, hey, we're not getting on-time performance needs met. So that's a mitigating factor. I think ultimately, though, Zuri, it comes down to an issue of partnership. If we're looking to use their tracks and we want to kind of have services that work well, then we kind of have to help each other out to be successful. And so there is that challenge about how can we work together? And I think they want to have, the better PR and not be brought to Surface Transportation Board. And we want to have a good service. And so it kind of has to be a partnership.
I would say like they've had 50 years of showing they have never prioritized passenger rail, even though it's federally mandated. And so trusting them, I feel like they need a stick hitting them repeatedly in the head over being nice to them, because we've been nice to them for 50 years and they have destroyed our rail networks. And they have made it so that we don't go to we go to only places that are important to them and not any locations that are important to people that are riding. Sorry, I have a lot of anger towards what they've done to our country and to undermine our infrastructure. And I think it's really important that we don't pretend that these are people trying to do anything but get as much profit with as little investment as possible. That's their business model. So I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know if you're a politician, what laws you can invoke, ways that we can go after them to make sure it's very, very unpleasant when they screw up.
Yeah, so I definitely hear what you're saying about the importance of on-time performance, the importance of having kind of penalties in place if you don't meet that. Definitely heard. That's the input we definitely want to hear. I think to the larger struggle of the freight railroads, that's, a little above my pay grade to address, but I hear you. I absolutely hear you.
It's just integral to the problems of what we are going to face if we're sharing rail. Even though you may not be able to do anything of it, if we are going to be sharing that rail with them, that's a pretty big reason to not. I mean, that's one of the, And then John Olson has a long comment. I'll read it.
Okay.
He says, I have to jump, and he left, but I disagree with the sentiment of needing speed. I would rather have 55-mile-per-hour rail that connects the cores of our cities than a high-speed rail that people have to drive to the airports to use. I'm disappointed with the video and the fact that COS was missed. We are not your parents' version of COS anymore. We are the future of the state. Thanks for the presentation. I hope to see more information about this in the future.
Got it.
Anyone else want to jump in while I stop yelling?
I had a couple other questions about service possibilities. One of the main ones is, how soon would it be possible to expand past Pueblo to include Trinidad or the Southwest Chief? I know there was talk about a link coming to Colorado Springs. I don't know if that's maybe out of the scope of this conversation, but just increasing the options for Front Range for passenger rail in Colorado Springs, I think would be appreciated to understand that better and understand if we could, if access to Southwest Chief and obviously a national rail network would be probably not nearer term, but how much further than the Front Range rail? And then the second question is, I've seen some proposals that include an Air Force Academy stop. And is that a possibility? Is that something that could possibly be proposed in the upcoming proposals? Or is that not something that is on the table right now?
Yeah, lots of great questions. So in terms of the Southwest Chief, there is a planning study being done right now that is looking at the possibilities of adding kind of a train car that breaks off in La Junta and then goes up to Pueblo and Colorado Springs and goes kind of back down to Trinidad. And that's the thing that's being evaluated. We would obviously love that, and or just completely rerouting the Chief. And so instead of that car just breaking off, it kind of connects up and down. Because that would obviously provide that segment of that southern connection and gives you part of that national network. And so that is a feasibility. That's a study that CDOT is leading right now. And so it is in progress. Again, it's challenging because that's part of Amtrak's long distance services. That's totally of their own kind of control. And so we have less ability to kind of to influence that, but that's a study that's happening. And I literally have an email from my board chair in my inbox to FRA about, how can we make this happen? So yeah, it's a great question. Air Force Academy Station, possible. So we have not kind of delineated what are going to be the final primary and secondary stations. There is that an ongoing balance of access and travel time, right? The more often the train stops, the less fast it is, the less competitive it is with travel times of driving. So it's a hard thing to have to balance. So that is still very much kind of under consideration, but it's not been defined yet. But I hear that question. And I forgot your third question.
I think those were the two main ones.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Zuri, we were looking at that as well as possible about kind of the more direct train versus the more local stop trains, as in we're definitely working on and thinking about. Yeah.
And then it looks like Jax has her hand up.
Oh, hi everybody. Sorry.
Nope.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Sorry about that. Some Wi-Fi stuff. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I'm curious, just trying to be equity minded. I know it's coming later. Like the market study about like what the fares will be. But just wondering if there's been any discussion, and if not, then I'm putting it in the chat right now is for especially folks who might be receiving social support like SNAP or something.
Yeah.
Would love, like, those people are connected with our local governments anyway, and would love to make sure that those people are going to have an accessible fare and, utilizing those connections that local governments have already to kind of, do outreach with our communities. So just wondering if there's any discussion so far along those lines. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a fabulous question. The fare structure is still being kind of worked on in sort of a next phase of the planning work, but absolutely it's expected that there will be a discount fare. That's really common throughout these kind of services, and even RTD, right, has kind of the discount fare. So definitely that's something we're planning on.
Carl?
Yeah.
So speaking of fares, is there any plans to integrate the Front Range train fare with like RTD, Colorado Springs Metro, the Mountain Metro Transit, those kind of things, so that people don't have to like have 6 cards or whatever tickets to get where they need to go?
No, I lived in Chicago for about 5 years, and it was always funny to have the conversations about, wait, why are these 3 cards and not one? And like every year it's like the conversation. I think a lot of us are bringing that perspective to the conversation and definitely have that lens of like, how can we make this work for people? We haven't reached that level of discussion yet, but that is a mindset that people are bringing to the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to second that. Is, anything with public transportation, reliability, safety, and then just that it's efficient and worthwhile and like affordable. It's like we have to make it so it's something that's actually usable. That's like what I think we've failed many times with. Yeah. Anybody else have more things they want to speak about?
I just have a question. You're probably not far enough in the conversation to in the planning to really know this, but amenities on the trains. So, and especially as a bike advocate, can we bring our bikes on the trains? Because getting that last mile is always a challenge. So that's the main question. Also, so I grew up in Chicagoland, so I know Metra really well in Naperville. So took the Metro all the way to the city all the time, and so I definitely agree and understand that whole multiple fare cards situation too. So that's just another plug for thinking through that down the line.
Yep. So I'm actually going to share my screen because I'm curious to hear what people have to say as well about this. So bike storage is totally doable, totally fine. That is to be expected. Why is it that I keep losing you guys when I share my screen? That is annoying.
You can change the view of your screen to be
Is that what I did?
side-by-side gallery.
Oh, you're on it. Wait, what did I?
So you might be on speaker mode, like side-by-side speaker, and then exit full screen.
Okay, hold on. You're way ahead of me.
No,
it's funny. I used to be really good at this. Now I'm like, what happened?
No, I just got on. I hadn't been on Zoom for a minute and I was like, what's happening? I would also say what would be really great is people can bring their dogs on and maybe have like a dog ID or, tracker to make sure that they're safe dogs. Like that might be helpful. Cause like we had somebody visit us and they brought their dog.
There we go.
And they would definitely take their SUV if they can't bring their dog.
Yeah, it's funny. I have had that comment more in the past week than I ever planned for. I think I'm hearing it. I want to give a good thought into that. My initial reaction is just kind of well, I've been on trains, people have dogs, so probably if you bring it on, who's going to stop you? But more than that, just kind of like how we have laws regarding restaurants, so kind of you can't bring your pet inside. How do we apply that in public transportation? So hearing that desire and wanting to do a little more research before I can give a yes or an absolutely no.
No, and so my aunt was like talking about like, okay, have something to track them so that they can't bring a dog that's not like, hasn't been whatever. I will say reliable Wi-Fi, restrooms, bike and ski racks are like my tops. Anybody else want to chime in on their top ones that they would like? And having dogs, I think people would just really like it.
Yeah, in my mind, everything except checked luggage would be my top. I know that's a lot of tops, but no, I think since it is a longer train ride, having the ability to work really makes it a viable option to driving, especially if you can bring another form of transportation or skis and connect to the hopefully functioning mountain line that goes to Steamboat by that time. So
yeah, and then and so in the comments it says, Jax agrees with me, reliable Wi-Fi, restrooms, bike and ski racks. I also would add charging outlets are always really helpful. And then Deb Ironman said, bikes allowed is my top.
Cool.
Anybody else? Any other new ideas or things? I wouldn't necessarily think a cafe is necessary if you can get something at the station. One thing I heard is that we're not thinking of funding stations. I can understand that. If we can get better rail, I kind of am okay with that. And it also seems like something you could have local businesses invest in a little bit. But I don't know.
I'm curious on the checked luggage one, if that's a desire or if that's just more of a question, because I see checked luggage more for Amtrak, but I'm curious to hear what feedback you've received on that one.
That's a great question. So that is one that in my mind is needs a little community exploration, because I guess to me it's part of that designing a service people want and they want to use, but also is at the right kind of level of investment. And checked luggage is one where it can cost more if you want to do that, right? And so it's kind of this question of, is it worth the more? And so I'm kind of asking people, what do they think? Because I want to make sure we put the money in the right place. And so hearing you say checked luggage, I don't really know. That's kind of where my gut leads as well, because everyone I know that travels by plane tries to avoid checking their bags. So I don't know why we'd want to check it here. But that's just an option of possible things.
Yeah, and then Joan in the comments said ways to refill water bottles. I think
Yeah,
that's
I love that.
yeah. And I mean, I wonder for checked luggage, just having space for luggage that's like convenient to get out. Would this eventually be able to connect to the airport? Like where we would be able to get, okay, that would be amazing.
Well, let me rephrase that. In the sense that you can get off at Union Station in Denver and take the A line, absolutely.
That's
and
what
yeah,
I
I think
mean.
yeah.
And again, like the timing, because that's the problem is like if it takes a lot more, like I tried to take like the bus to the A line and it was like they were like, why? like Google Directions was like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So what, Deb, what did you want to say?
I had a question about within the city connectivity. Is part of the research being done right now? I guess I'm wondering, will like it looks like Colorado Springs is likely to start with just one station, if you will, one access point. So getting to and from that access point, like, will that fall to the cities individually to research and support, or is that part of the whole rail program?
That's a great question. And that is also one of those I think will be sussed out later on. I think the understanding is a desire to work in partnership with kind of the mountain metros of the world to sort of help us kind of better integrate the systems. In some circumstances, it's not uncommon for these kind of services to have like a bus connection from like, I don't know, 30 miles south of the most southernmost station up to kind of get to that main line. But generally speaking, those more local connections kind of fall on the part of the local transit agencies. That's probably going to be more of a mountain metro thing.
Okay, and it seems like a piece that maybe we can organize further down when the rail is like actually built, rather than trying to anticipate it now, maybe. And then I have a few comments from my aunt. She wanted the dogs using a chip to track or dog passports. She thought about porters, stop doing testing. Like she did not want, if there was a if it's on the ballot, she did not want it to be about having planning for it. I think people that are like longtime residents have had this on the ballot where they're like, we're going to spend $100 million on figuring out what we should maybe do. And it's like, if it's on the ballot, make it, this is what it is. And this is what you're voting for, not I'm voting on a maybe plan. Which I agree with her at, and then figure out a way. And so she actually did have figure out a way to handle cargo. She's like, I'm older. I don't want to have to worry about having to lift things if I'm carrying heavy stuff. So that would be a place for checked luggage, just like that. It's maybe there's a porter on there. Maybe there's someone that helps you just put it in. It doesn't necessarily have to be checked, but just that it's dealt with and older people aren't having to move heavy stuff. Does anyone else have things they want to say? Oh, observation car, Cully said.
Yeah, just the Front Range has beautiful views, right? So I could see it being a tourist attraction if there was an observation car. It's not on my top list, I think, of amenities, but it would be something that could be cool. Yeah.
Maybe on like occasional cars, like maybe occasionally a train will have that, and that could be a special train or something.
Yeah. This is incredibly helpful. I am writing as we go. Next question for you all. And if I'm missing anything, let me know. Which of these aspects is like most important for like, yep, I'm going to take the train because I compare them. I am most passionate about travel time. And if it's faster or just as fast, then like I'll be on the train. If it's, 2 minutes slower, not doing the train. So those kind of factors, which ones are most important?
I'll be loud as always, but everybody jump in too. And if you need to in the chat, the reliability is important. I need to know that I can go. And like the frequency is important and the travel time is important. I also care about the lower carbon footprint, but if it's not feasible for me to get to my job, I can't do it. I can't be like, I'm going to drive, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get to work today versus 40 minutes. I can't do that. Even an hour more, I can't do that. Even an hour, I can't do that. It financially just doesn't work and it's too exhausting. So I care a lot about that, and I know that it's safer than traveling. Like I want to, but it has to be reliable. It has to be fast. And it's got to be frequent enough that if I get off of work, because I have a variable schedule, then I'm able to get the train. Because I can't, what happens all the time with transport in Colorado Springs is I'll be able to take the bus one way and then it'll be faster for me to walk home than it will be for me to take the bus. And like, I can't walk between Pueblo and Colorado Springs. So I can't be like, getting home at 7 and then I have to get up in the morning and like I've got no turnaround time because it's just not there's not enough service and it takes too long and I'm exhausted by the time I've like done this.
I'll jump in and say, I mean, it sounds like we're supposed to pick like our top one.
Whatever.
Okay. So for me, it's travel time. Like there's no way I'm gonna take the train if it takes me longer doing that than to drive. Like that's my opinion.
And then in the chat, Andrea Newland said convenience, reliability, cost, and bold letters, safety.
I want to know what safety means. The bold letters got me excited. What does that mean?
Yeah, Andrea Newland, come on in and explain safety.
Okay, so one of the biggest things that we as a group focus on, as well as our personal concerns, are how frequent and dangerous car accidents are here. So if we can travel between cities without having to worry about other drivers and not put ourselves at risk of getting into a fatal car accident, yeah, that's way important. Neither one of us drive terribly much anyway, but we go to Denver every couple of months and 25 is scary sometimes. And we've had firsthand experience with our earlier this month, our presentation, our memorial service for all of the people who have died in car accidents in this city alone, that we want our train transportation to be, and it will be, because it just naturally is, way safer than car transportation. But we also had this freight train accident between Springs and Pueblo recently. That was a big deal and shut down a whole bunch of stuff. So that ties into the reliability. We need to know that we're going to be okay and it's not going to delay everything for days afterwards if something happens.
And it might be good as a public information thing to focus on this, to explain that like it's 10 times safer to ride a train than it is to be on, to drive. And then in the chat, Naomi Lopez, equal access regardless of ability or social economic impact. So, ADA compliant and like easy to get around. I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about trains is that if I mess up, I cross the platform and I can get on another train. Whereas with a bus, like you can't always, you might go across the street and you're going a totally different place. So that one's really important. Savannah says reliability and connections to local transit like RTD or Mountain Metro. And I think maybe like putting it in that is like what step that is in the plan for people, and that's going to be something that will be addressed, because that is important. Like if I think, oh, we're going to do the train, but how am I going to get there? That makes it different. Deb Ironman says reliable and convenient and safe and close access to station. So similar. Cully says frequency ability to work on board. I am okay with it being moderately slower than car travel, but it needs to be reliable and affordable. And then Joan says reliability and safe and comfortable.
So
Yeah.
one additional comment on that, Zuri. So for me, the reliability is number one, right? You're trying to plan your day. Like you're saying, you got a meeting to make, you got to get home, whatever. It doesn't, for me, I would love for it to be as fast as driving, but I take the light rail into Denver, out of South Denver, downtown, and it's slower, right? If traffic is moving, you can definitely drive faster into downtown Denver. But if traffic is backed up, the train is reliable. It's always that whatever 45 minutes. And, because it doesn't have all the stops due to crashes and that kind of stuff. So that's a huge positive, that reliability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, I mean, I still think the speed would be really nice. I mean, to draw people in, just, maybe it's just my brain, but my brain's like frustrated with the idea that like I could do one thing and it would be faster. But I think also having the amenities and the reliability does make it possible. I'm just worried that in the future, if we don't keep investing, that like this might be the only time we ever invest in trains, and then what do we do? Okay, do you have more questions for us, Chrissy?
No, those are the big ones, and we're at time, so I want to be respectful of that.
Awesome. Any more comments? Anything else that we could bring in? I like to say it out loud because it's recording, so that if somebody just wants to listen, they're at least like they're kind of getting the comments too. So if you put anything in. Oh yeah, thank you, Naomi. Yeah, and thank you for everyone who showed up and spoke.
Yeah.
Can I ask? I feel like this is like a sort of random, but it is relevant in that I think there are a lot of excited discussions around Front Range passenger rail. And in another one, I overheard this idea, and I'm just really just curious. So if you need to jump, by all means, but the thoughts around, like, I feel like it almost defeats the purpose, but for instance, if you were coming from Pueblo and you wanted to save all that time, but when you got to Fort Collins, you actually needed to have a vehicle, like, is there any possibility that people could, I don't know the technical term for it, but basically like a ferry train for your car, is something I've heard people mention. I don't personally endorse it. Again, I feel like it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm curious about that. Thanks.
It's funny because your conversation, I thought the question was going to go this way and it went that way. But I'm going to answer both parts of that. I hear you. It's not in the playbook we're playing in, but it's not what we're doing, but I get it. And it does kind of in some ways make a lot of sense. What I was thinking more so about was once you get to the station, what kind of will its station have, ride share cars that are parked at the station? That if you're part of that network, would it have kind of a Lyft integration and a ticket like that where you can take Lyft or Uber from there? Would it have, scooters at them, things like that? So I think we're playing more in the space of those kind of micro mobility sort of things and less in the space of car by train.
Yeah, and personally, I would rather multimodal and connections to buses and trains than because part of what's so great about trains is that they're extremely efficient, and part of what's so horrible about cars is that they're extremely inefficient. So adding them back into stations just makes everything more inefficient and takes up space and puts people further away from local businesses. So I'm pretty anti-car anyway, but like especially near a train station, that means it's less walkable. When you have more parking, you make it less walkable and less safe for everybody that's biking, walking, taking a bus, taking another metro. So but thanks.
I've got good counterpoints now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's like guys, what you guys are talking about is taking the train. Like all good there's a saying, all good transit eventually becomes a train. And my addition is all bad planning eventually becomes a parking lot. So if your goal is to add more parking, you're probably going in the wrong direction. Like, to me, maybe in a rural area where where it's not feasible to be efficient, that's a different area and that's a different type of planning. But if you're going into Denver, you're making it less efficient and less comfortable for people when you add parking, even if it seems like at the beginning that it's not. At least to me, that's not everybody. I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm just very pushy. So I'm not speaking for everyone, but yeah. All right. Any more questions? Any more comments? Well, a
I
huge,
appreciate this. Yeah, thank you guys. If you haven't already, go through the awful online comment form, sign up for our e-blasts. If you ever want to submit a formal comment through that process, you're welcome to submit a comment through that. My email's in the chat if you ever want to find me. More good things to come this spring. And again, I'm so sorry that I have like I'm getting sick stuff going on.
and,
But
and I'll send out an email that's like
okay,
a little, and oh, if you could you, I'm going to also upload this to YouTube. And then I'll send that out, and then I'll send out like your email. There was another email you put in, and then the link to the comments. And so I'll just put that together.
Okay.
To all the people that even didn't come, they're still getting it. It's like you have to actively opt out if you don't want this information. So yeah. So and then yeah, and if you have any times or like anything, like if an Instagram account goes online, we have like an Instagram account that's got 1,200 people and another one that has 700, and we're happy to put that in stories or make it on the main account for Beautiful Colorado Springs. And we will advocate for this. And I'm really happy to hear that there are higher speeds. Like it's not necessarily that we need high speed rail, but that it can go fast. I would love it if it would get up to 110 miles an hour, but one can only dream. I just, I just think it's like, if we're going to spend the money, but if there's plans to then keep going, I just want to know how we'll deal with freight companies, because they have never invested. So what frustrates me is like we have the Acela, and we also don't we only get trains from the US, so we don't get up to date infrastructure compared to other countries. Like I think
I haven't heard that part as much, but
I know that that's true for buses. I'm not sure for trains, but the problem is, so like the Acela is supposed to be high speed rail, but it's on the wrong kind of rail. So basically you have like a car that's supposed to go fast, but is actually being back, like it's like we're not dealing with up-to-date stuff. So, all right. Thank you, Carl. And yeah, so I just want to make sure that that's where I get worried. I'm like, so we're just going to try to make things worse in order to accommodate freight. That's where I get worried. So
I hear you.
Whatever trains we have or whatever we do with the rail, is it not going to be a weird retrofit to make something worse and less efficient and possibly less safe in order to get there?
I hear you. Yeah.
But I do like your approach and the idea of like trying to step into it and trying to increase. And thank you for clarifying that it was different than Amtrak, because that was confusing.
Yeah, the long distance stuff is different than sort of the state supported stuff. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. And I'll upload this recording on YouTube. Good night.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.